aside from my Eurostar story, which was half joke, half deadly serious, which is that if you want to get people to take the train to Paris rather than the plane, trying to compete on speed isn't the way to do it. Ultimately, planes are faster than trains. But actually competing on the quality of the time spent on board and the time spent on transit was a much better way to invest than reducing the duration of that time. Okay, nobody boasts that cruise ships are really fast, because the whole notion is that you actually enjoy or find productive or relaxing the time you spend on board the ship. And there's no reason why a train can't compete on that psychological dimension rather than competing on the engineering dimension of speed. But then I came up with another point, which is, look, if you want to increase the capacity of the West Coast Line and you want to also reduce journey time between London and Manchester, you can spend 70 billion on High Speed 2. But before you do that, I can achieve those two aims in quite large measure with an app that costs £1 million and would take about 6 months to instigate. You'd want to spend a few million advertising it as well, by the way, but nonetheless, it's a 7-figure solution, not an 8 or 9-figure solution. And it's simply this: you redefine journey time as being end-to-end journey time, not time spent on the train. Because whenever I go to Manchester, I book an advanced first class ticket, because if you book a full fare ticket, even in second class, it costs £1 billion. Okay. And then I can't afford to miss that designated train. So I turn up 45 minutes early at Euston leaving a margin of error. And I end up bumming around Burger King at Euston for, 30 minutes. Now, with an app, you could simply say, I'm at Euston, and they would say, pay us £5 and you can board the train in 5 minutes, which is leaving 50% empty, or the train in 25 minutes, 20 minutes before your designated train, which is also basically half empty, because they usually are. Okay? And I'd pay a bit of money, so the app could actually make a profit over time. I'd reduce my journey time by 20 or 40 minutes by being allowed to use empty capacity on an earlier train. Okay, they'd also massively increase capacity, because I don't want to get into the whole detail of rail travel, but allowing people to leave early on empty seats is a capacity increasing thing. EasyJet will do that. If you turn up insanely early at the airport and they've got 7 free seats on the flight to Luton, they'll let you fly back to Luton early, because now they've got a second chance to take passengers on the subsequent journey in the seats that you've now vacated. And, if you look at the evacuation of the American Embassy compound in Saigon, right, every helicopter left full. As long as there were people on the roof trying to leave, they put them in a helicopter, because you don't say, no, we're going to leave with this helicopter half empty because all of you guys, you're actually booked on the 2 p.m. departure, right? That would have been really fucking annoying, right? If you're trying to get out of Saigon, if you'd had anally retentive helicopter pilot, right? No, you're not booked on this flight, so I'm afraid we're going to leave empty. Okay. Now, trains do that all the time. It's a very interesting field, actually, called lateral category analysis. If you look at what happens in one field of business, quite often that problem's been solved in another field, but no one's actually made the association. And the point I'm making there, what was so interesting about that is people didn't go, that's a really interesting solution and we really ought to implement it before we spend billions on High Speed 2. They basically said, no, you're cheating because you're defining journey time differently. And I said, I'm defining journey time in the only way that's meaningful to a passenger, which is how long my effing journey takes, right? And the last thing you want to reduce is the time on the train, because that's high quality time. There's quite good Wi-Fi. I can work. I can look out of the window. I can commune with my fellow northerners, cheery northerners, right? I can do lots and lots of things, right? On the train. I don't mind being on the train. It's the hanging around for 45 minutes to wait for a designated train that pisses me off. So this is a better solution. But for some reason, that's regarded as cheating. If you solve the problem perceptually, or you solve the problem through the eyes of the individual customer, that isn't regarded as valid, because engineers are trying to solve the problem at the system level, which is fundamentally different. And so one of the important things is that when we start using maths, we think that maths is context-free and perspective-free. Okay? Because we go, it's maths, it's like pure, these are the facts. Okay? Now I'll give you a lovely example of this. Okay? The average household in Britain is probably, 1.4 people per household. Okay? The average person in Britain does not live in a 1.4 person household, obviously. But actually, the average person in Britain probably lives in a 3-person household, because far more people live in bigger households than live in 1-person households.
Yeah.
So in quite a lot of cases, and this is important, by the way, with things like wealth inequality, because people, not wrongly, get upset about wealth inequality. But if you look at the statistics, they're comparing the poorest 10%, let's say, in 1990 with the poorest 10% in 2000 with the poorest 10% in 2010. Okay, and they're saying, look, this group of the population haven't got any richer. But they're not the same people. Okay, some of them are. And those are the people you should concentrate in. The people who are in the poorest decile of the population for 15 years in a row, they've patently got stuck somewhere. But actually, a trainee barrister who may be heavily in debt can technically be in the poorest 20% of the population. No one would think of him as poor, because he's chosen to spend up front for the benefit of long-term prospects. Okay, I mean, a lot of students are probably, objectively extremely poor, but you wouldn't think of someone with a first-class degree in physics as being skint, because he's got skills which he can parlay into future salary. And so it's really important, I think, that what we tend to do is we look at numbers and we go, numbers are facts. They're not facts. They're a particular take on reality. And they're just as much... the classic example, by the way, with trains is that most trains aren't overcrowded. In fact, most trains are empty. But most people travel on crowded trains. So the perception of rail overcrowding... In fact, it's worse than that, because infrequent rail users tend to use the train at Christmas, at Easter, and at kind of bank holiday weekends, when there are engineering works, just to add to the problem, and the trains are fucking rammed. Right? So our perception of train overcrowding is immense, even though the statistics would show that the vast majority of trains, to be honest, you can stretch your legs and play bowls down the aisle. So it's a really important point, this, that numbers don't tell the full story. And yet we tend to think they do.